Hi, it's Stephen here from Sound of Nation Wave, and this is day 12 of the October daily draws. So let's see what message we get as we close out the weekend and approach a new week. I'll be taking the first card from the Ghost Tarot, followed by an Oracle card from the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. So let's use our first card and get the reading underway. We have the Nine of Swords. Which again is swords, is the mind. At the moment we seem to be getting a lot about our thoughts, how we think about things. We had the Eight of Swords, didn't we? Yesterday we had the Eight of Swords. And about limiting thinking. At least I think it was yesterday. If it wasn't, it was the day before that. I'm sure it was yesterday. I could check, but I won't. The Nine of Swords follows on. And it's like if we don't deal with those limiting, restricting thoughts that seem to tie our hands and hold us back, then we it's that powerless kind of feeling that pervades then the sense of powerlessness and inability to act, and then that leads to anxiety and fear and stress and all the kinds of things that we get here in the Nine of Swords. Things that can keep us up, literally keep us up at night, stop us from sleeping, things that play on our minds. And when we're in that state of feeling powerless, and we're in this state where they sort of culminate to the degree they can become exaggerated, things can take on a different sort of outlook for us and intensify, and we can, it's almost like this is often called the nightmare card. And it's almost in it. It's like we can enter into a nightmare situation, but nightmares tend to end when we wake up. These anxieties can, yes, they can play on our minds. They can give us a nightmare. The nightmare may end when we wake up, but we still may have those thoughts of anxiety and fear and torment that played on our minds through the nightmare because of how our mind is working at the moment. So I do. Let me just check. It was yesterday. I ought to have had this at the side of me. I'm sure it was the Eight of Swords yesterday. It was the Eight of Swords yesterday, and we've now got the Nine. So to me, I'm linking the two, because the Eight, as I say, is more about feeling powerless, inability to act, and then that can create the anxiety that you get here, because we don't feel that we can act. And the way to deal with that is to go back to yesterday's message of reclaiming our power and taking control of our mind and our thoughts more, and realizing that we're not as powerless as we first felt or thought, that we have come to believe. This then, and once we deal with that, once we deal with our perception, see, this is a development of that perception. And if we deal with that perception, then that neutralizes some of the power of these anxieties and fears that we get. And also, with this card, I always say that there's two types here of things. These like things that we can create anxieties, and we can create things, scenarios in our mind of how worst case scenarios we play out in our mind. They have no basis in fact or reality. It's just what we think could happen, and that gives us the fear, and probably won't happen except in our minds. It's the things that are just in our heads, but it's enough to give us genuine feelings of anxiety and fear, and that can impact us even physically and emotionally. Those thoughts that we have. And then there are things that are based on things that are concerns. We haven't made them up. There are things in life that we may be concerned about. There may be issues that we need to, deal with, that could be sources of stress or worry. And they're not imaginary, like what I've just mentioned. They're real. But again, even with the real problems, is it possible we're magnifying them, to a stature far greater than is warranted? Are we magnifying the problem because of our sense of powerlessness in the situation? And as I say, this is why it goes back to the 8 that comes before this card. Because if we can start to get control of our thoughts and have that belief that we are not as powerless as we first thought, imagined, or felt that we were, or in that situations and people tried to convince us that we were, once we change our perception and the way that we think, then, as I say, it takes some of the sting out of these anxieties and fears. It doesn't necessarily remove the genuine source of the fear. That if there's issues to be dealt with, they'll still need to be dealt with. But the issue here is how we think about it, and about our ability to actually face them, the challenges and concerns that we may genuinely have, and our ability to face them and deal with them. And if we can sort of grasp them in our minds better, then a lot of this nightmarish sort of terror of the situation can be neutralized, and we become equipped then, and we feel that we can, although there may be problems to solve, we can solve them. They can be solved, or we can get around them. We're going to be all right. It's not the end of the world kind of situation. And, like we perhaps thought it was. And we were inundated with all of this oppressive sort of thinking. That may lift to a large degree and enable us then to be able to tackle it with more focus and clarity, whatever it is that we need to tackle. And I think so. This is getting your thinking and your perception correctly, and recognizing that we are, like we had yesterday, the message of that you're more able than you may think, and you're not as restricted, as limited as you might imagine, and you can do more than you would think. And then that takes some of the sting out of this kind of situation and gives us our ability to find some peace about it, and to find some clarity of mind enough to be able to work out a solution. Okay, so let's see which oracle card we get to go with that. Greet the darkness. It's a very similar situation, isn't it? In a very dark setting there, bent over, passing away. And it's like you greet the darkness with more confidence, instead of you getting getting tormented by it, getting the nightmare reaction to it. You greet it with confidence in your self-belief that you can deal with this. Here, where the spine bends and the mouth quivers, breathes the hidden, the pieces that make you whole, but cut deep with all their sharp edges. So it's like even things about ourselves, the fears, the things that hold us back, these limiting things, confront them and face them and find ways to overcome them or to push through them. And, then you will be more able mentally to deal with whatever it is that you need to deal with. Okay, so that is today's message. I'll be back tomorrow with day 13. Until then, thank you for listening. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you all again very soon. Okay, bye-bye.